No, and I have to be honest because I tend to be a pretty positive person. But when I read the script, I went, damn, I don't get to stick around. And it was really hard because when I finished my stuff, everybody else got to stay. I mean, it's odd because the kids get sent away. You get sent away to your grandma's house, and the older daughter gets sent away, and Carol Ann does too. So basically by the end, well, Carol Ann's in the TV, but the older daughter does. And by the end, it's basically just the team of, Richard, Beatrice, Zelda, and Joe, Beth, and Craig. And they're the only ones who are in like almost the last 45 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just them. And I always felt like I had to leave, like I was bad or I was being punished. It was like,
weird.
It was so much fun. And I thought it was weird when I read the script. And part of it was that some people that came up and talked to us, I told this story to, which is there was an entire sequence shot with me that was cut out of the film. That was really pretty awful, and if the sequence had, I had all the Toby sequences. That's what we used to make jokes. I was in the Toby Hooper movie, and everybody else was in the Spielberg movie. And there was a sequence in the movie where I went upstairs. You see it. I go, I don't believe that. I think it's coming from a radio transmitter upstairs. And I go and you see me run up the stairs. And then when I come back, I have a big bite, which Oliver and I had our scene together. He looks at us, oh, you got bit. Well, they shot that whole sequence. And I used to run upstairs, and they built the coolest doorknob on the kid's bedroom, and the doorknob just kept turning and turning, and they would like dolly in on me, turning it and turning it and turning it. It's very Spielberg. And when I opened the door, there was this huge rush, and a ghost basically wrapped itself around me, dragged me up to the ceiling, and then bit me in the side, and then threw me down on the floor. And it was a great sequence. It took us all day to shoot. I was in what they called the Peter Pan harness, which, if no one's ever been in a harness here and made you fly, it's really uncomfortable.
As a male.
Yeah. As a male, yes. It's really very painful. Yeah, it's like all those, that's why they always have a woman playing Peter Pan, I think, because it's tough to wear that harness all day long. And we shot the scene. Toby was actually working with everybody else. That was actually a scene, the famous who directed the movie. It was Toby for us. I know for all of you too. But Stephen directed that of me being, and it was amazing. I opened the door and then Stephen would yell, scream, and I would just let out this blood-curdling scream, and the guy would just hoist me about 15 feet up into the air and then looked like I was being smashed against the ceiling. And they had a whole rig set up with guys off stage with almost like the things they used to set off squibs on guns, but mine they had a whole thing built into the harness that was filled with Lux liquid detergent that was sort of this opalescent pearly sort of gunk. And when I got dragged up into the air, and then I was kicking and screaming, and then Stephen would go, bite! And I would keel over and grab my side, at which point they would press all these buttons, and all this stuff came out of my side and looked like a big bite mark on my shirt.
Wow.
And that was fun. It was fun and painful, and it was great because it was Stephen too. That was one of the days when it was just Stephen and I and a small, like a B camera crew shooting this. And it was like 5 or 6 months later, I got a call, and it was from Stephen, and he said, I just want to let you know we had to cut the sequence because what's going on downstairs with Jo Beth, it's that beautiful, beautiful moment where she says, oh, I felt her soul go through me. I felt her inside me. And Stephen said, we couldn't cut away from that to you upstairs. And they were really great, and they gave me still footage of it, and they gave me some photos and things like that. So I have a little collection of photos of me screaming and up in the air, like 15 feet up in the air.
Wow.
So that was why I left. And that was the part that was left out. That's why I just suddenly vanished all of a sudden, because they figured out the house really did not like me. Yeah.
It is so obvious that something like that happened.
Something bad happened upstairs. Yeah.
Yeah. This brings up a great point. Something that I did want to make a point to discuss is that history has this as a Tobe Hooper film, of course. It's very distinctively Amblin, in a way, I guess you could say. Spielbergian. So I'd like to ask both you guys, starting with you. I mean, you hinted to it a little bit. What did you see on set in terms of Toby's interaction? How much of it is his vision, and how much was Stephen behind the curtain as Oz making this thing come together?
You know, it's funny. I thought about that, and that's been a question that I think will haunt us for the remainder of the history of this movie. Bottom line is, Toby directed the movie. But one thing you really have to think or know about filmmaking it's a collaborative effort, and that's something I learned even more so than in film school. Everyone contributes to the process, and people forget that Steven was the first writer of the movie. It was his vision, it was his creation. He's also the producer. And while Toby directed me in every conceivable scene on the set, Steven was there always contributing his input in the script, in the story. And that's what every writer would want to do. I've written things for television. I wanted to be able to put my 2 cents in. And directors always confer with me on what I wanted to do. But in terms of who told me what to do on set, where to stand, how the film's going to be shot, as a kid, I remember Toby doing everything that a director should do and needs to do. And the DGA even looked into it years later, I guess, and they confirmed everything that I saw on set too. But the bottom line is, it was a heavy duty Spielberg film and movie because it was coming from Steven's script, and the way Steven had written the script, and I reread it a little bit recently, it almost reads like a shot list in such a way. So if you're a director and you're following the script to the writer's vision, you're probably going to achieve something that is a Spielberg movie. So it wasn't very much like, there's the famous eighth of a page in Lawrence of Arabia, which says Lawrence takes Aqaba, and that's a 15-minute sequence. The movie Poltergeist was not written like that. Every sequence was very detailed. Every line was a shot, pretty much. So if you follow that, you were going to make a Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
I basically had the same experience on the first day of shooting. Something happened, and I've talked about it. So and they even, like, when the DJ looked into it. It was the scene with the special effects on the teapot again, and that first day, Toby would whisper something in our ears, and then they would yell action, and we would do the scene, and then Steven would yell cut, and Steven would come around and whisper something in our ears. And that went on for about 6 minutes, and Beatrice Straight said, "One director, please, this has got to stop." And that was, and it went on literally for about 6 or 7 minutes, half an hour at the very most. And she just said, "That's not how we do this. We have one director on here." And after that, Toby did everything. Steven had lots of input, like Oliver said. It was his script. Yeah. It was Toby.
Okay.
Yeah. Other people will say, you might get different answers if you ask other actors on the movie, interestingly enough.
Yeah. Probably the most iconic sequence in the entire film. It plays on so many fears for so many people out there. And so I really wanted to give you some time to talk about the clown sequence. And I know that this had a actual effect on you physically as well when you were doing this. So can you talk about that whole thing?
Well, people always ask me, they say, were you, because of doing that film, were you terrified of clowns now? And I said, no, actually, I was terrified of trees and clowns and all those childhood fears. I was a fraidy kid. I was afraid of the dark, pretty much. I wanted to sleep with the light on. It's probably one of the reasons why they gave me the part, because I was Robbie, as a living incarnation of him too. In terms of it being strangled, I read that on the internet, and honestly, I can't remember whether that happened or not. I don't know if I put it out of my mind or it really didn't happen at all too. I remember that we shot that very fast. We shot that within hours. It was a very fast sequence. And in terms of the technology, that was prior to all the CGI. And what they did is they had a tree, they had a clown doll arm they had a backwards camera, where I had to start, in terms of my performance, all the way up here. And then I had to come down. So I had to start at my pinnacle of fear and then go back to be normal. And then the arm would start around me, then they pulled it away. So when the film was actually played forward, it would look the way it did, that the arm would actually, I'd grow terrified, and the arm would wrap its arm around me. So it was kind of a technical scene. So actually, it wasn't that scary to actually make. It was actually kind of complicated because I really had very little experience acting, and they said, "Oliver, you're gonna have to act backwards in this scene. We need you to start big and then go slower." I'm like, "Okay, so you want me to be terrified and then normal?" I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what we need you to do." And we shot that. It was sort of a seamless sequence. I remember we shot it just very fast.
When you were under the bed with the clown, it's such a tight thing. Did they have an elevated bed that you were working under with puppeteers, or how did that work when he was actually on you?
It's kind of hazy because I was so young then,
Yeah.
but I believed in order to get the camera, they were shooting with these big 35 cameras, and they had to plop, the bed actually had to be raised to get the camera up there. So I'm guessing that's exactly how they probably did it. It was probably on, wooden platform of some kind, and just to be able to see me down there. And most of the struggle, I had to create myself, just like with the tree scene. There really were very little special effects. So they said, if you're being strangled, throw yourself around, pretend like the clown is actually strangling you. So all of that is really just acting, as they say, I guess. And I think because it's just me doing a lot of that stuff, it looks more real because you're not really relying upon heavy duty special effects there.
All right.
We're kind of running out of time here, but I just wanted to ask you guys for final thoughts on the legacy of Poltergeist and how you've carried it with you and your perspective on it in your careers historically.
I think no matter what we do in our life from this point on, this will be our 15 minutes of fame, and I'm happy with that because I'm really grateful to have been part of something so special and also had the opportunity to work with so many great people, which I don't know what I'd be where I am without that. It inspired me to become a filmmaker on the set. It showed me how amazing a movie can be, the best it can possibly be, and it allowed me to come in contact with people that are just so utterly talented in every single division on that movie. Everyone from the property department to the special effects guys to the filmmakers. They were the best of the best, and that defined, I think, filmmaking in the mid '80s. And even I've watched the film today, and I'm thinking, God, this is a really good movie. And, better than I have to say most films being made today, for the most part. And I'm just glad to be, I guess, now part of that legacy.
Yes, I agree. I just felt really lucky to be a part of it, and I taught school for a while. I still do occasionally. I teach writing classes. That's what I do now. I'm a writer. I have plays and screenplays produced, and when I teach school, sometimes if the kids I try not to let them know, because but if the kids do find out, particularly soon after the film came out, I would get to class and they'd all go, "Rip off your face, rip off your face."
Take the lens off the camera.
Yeah, take the lens off the camera, or eat a bunch of Cheetos.